Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode called Break Free. I haven't made a video in a long time, but it's because I've been very busy with work. Um, and ironically, I was going to come here. I've been meaning to make this video to talk about conditioning, predeterminism, determinism, how we have no free will, and how we actually have no real choice and decisions. I mean, we do a little bit, but not as much as we like to think. And ironically, I have just quit a job that I had at the school. So today was my last day, basically. Um, and it's ironic because I'm going to talk about how we're conditioned, how we can't break free, yet I have just broken free. But on a small scale, right? I mean, these are the type of things I think that you do have free will to do. You even have free will to do more than this, but at a risk, right? And then when you, I think when you pursue certain freedoms, you end up losing other freedoms. I'm going to exemplify this. So, if I were to say, for example, I don't know, I'm free to go to Japan right now, and all of a sudden I just like, hitchhiked my way to Japan or found ways to get there. Like, then as soon as I got there or on my way there, I would be suffering all these other things, which would be ultimately like I would be missing freedom, right? I would be missing freedoms. Like if I were, let's say I'm on the road to Japan, right? I'm hitchhiking and all of a sudden I get robbed, right? And now I don't have the freedom. A friend once told me freedom, it depends on money. The more money you have, the more freedom you have. And I keep thinking about that because I think it is true. I run into that over and over again. So let's say you get robbed on the road to Japan, right? And now you don't have the freedom to decide whether you want to stay at a hotel, a 1 star, a 2 star, B or what R&B, B&B or whatever, right? So, or even if you do manage to get to Japan, then what, right? Like, the lack of freedom there would be then that you have no family, you have no connections, you have no money, you don't know the language, etc., right? So you're limited again, right? So it's like, is this freedom really worth all of the other freedoms I'm going to sacrifice that then, right? Like to a certain extent, and maybe I'm wording it wrong, but I think I'm getting the message across. So anyway, to get into the topic of how you're conditioned, I mean, I think I've spoken on this before, but it goes back to something a teacher once said, and it was kind of like rhetorical, the question, but at the same time, it was trying to make you think. And the teacher basically said, asked us if there is a way to not be conditioned, right? And I don't think there is because, and especially now because, where you're in life, where you are in life right now, is because um, they say it's because of the choices you made, but it's really not. It's because of your genetic baggage, the evolutionary baggage, your ancestors, everything that you have from them, right? That basically makes you who you are, makes you based on your personality, makes you decide certain things, talk about, feel certain things, behave in certain ways, think in certain ways, right? Like all of this stuff, you didn't. It's not like Build a Bear where you can choose. Oh, I want to have these skills. I want to be able to think this way, but not this way. I want to tone down the hypercritical state I have, or hypercritical states, but I want to augment, or I want to bring up the happiness or the dopamine effect or whatever. Like, no, man, like, you are the way you are because that's just the way you are. But if we really look at it, there is an explanation. But then my point here is not where it comes from or whatever, because again, we can talk about culture, we can talk about evolution, we can talk about your family, your upbringing, your friends, your context, your preferences, the things you like. Why do you like the things you like, right? Probably because it's an echo of things from the past as well, right? So there's a lot of conditioning, and then the conditioning here is in well, based on the debate, nature versus nurture, right? You are who you are. Why? Because of your context or because of your genes? Well, it's both. We know it's both. And this basically, leads me to, well, the third factor, the third element, which I've written about, which is free will, right? Which is you, which is that which is being affected, right? um, it's an interesting take, because you can say, well, who is this person that's being affected by all of this? And you can just say you're kind of like a blank canvas, right? Like you're just a vessel, something that's that's being deposited, or that's depositing all of these things in it, right? And then you're just a mix of all these things. Um, and like I was saying, my point here is that it's that you basically, it doesn't matter where all this stuff comes from. Just know that you're not in charge of your life, right? Like you don't have control over your life. Basically, um, you're going to do what you're going to do either way, right? And then we get into determinism, because then we can say, well, okay, let's look at the past, let's look at the future, let's look at the present. Why have things, will things, why are things happening the way they're happening? Why have they happened the way they happen? Why will they happen the way they happen? They will happen. Well, because that's the way it's written, right? It's like God's an author, right? And he's writing the book of our lives. And I wanna throw this in the mix, because I'm not saying that it's rigid. I'm not saying it's written in stone, right? And there are a lot of movies like The Butterfly Effect. I think is a good example. I've written on this too. Harry Potter 3. Harry Potter 3 is more rigid, but like movies, I think like Dark, like and I'm talking about the closed time traveling loop, right? Where what's going to happen is going to happen no matter what. How it happens, and then we can get into like, well, what are the characteristics of the process of something happening, and then what is the difference between, because in the process of something happening, aren't those things also meant to be? Or how do we define the process? How do we differentiate the process of something happening from the thing that's supposed to happen, right? So let's say, um, it was written that I was going to buy a car, right? And I had to get a car, but how I got a car would vary, right? Because either I would oppose it, I would be against it, I wouldn't really want a car, yet life would force me to get a car eventually. Or I wanted to get a car, but I didn't want to get it like this or like that, or I did want to get it like this, but that route wasn't, I wanted to get it with a down payment, but they wouldn't accept the down payment. They wanted a bank loan or whatever, right? So then, but the objective here is, to get the car, right? Either way, you were going to get a car. But then, you know, why isn't getting a loan from a bank another objective, another event that's supposed to happen, right? And again, no matter how you get that loan, it doesn't matter if it gets offered to you on the street, if you go ask for it at a bank, if someone tells you about it, if they make you get the loan, right? Like, see where the problem is? Then how do we differentiate one thing from the other? Okay, but that can be fun to think about. But anyway, let's just assume that something that was supposed to happen, that happened, that is happening, that will happen, is like an event that has to do with like a change, with like a deep change, or a deeper change, or a change that has more impact than other little changes, other little things that are important too, that happen, that create change. But this, let's just qualitatively say it has a bigger impact on your life, okay? And the process, the way you get there, is flexible. So you can say, like Back to the Future, I think, like, no matter what happens, um, you're still going to end up at that place, right? So if I was like, I don't want to work at this school where there are middle school kids, because I don't really like middle school kids, or I don't like working with middle school kids. Yet, um, you know, I get the opportunity to work there and I reject the job offer. But then eventually, dire times, I'm in need of money. So eventually, I start looking for work, and not at that school, but at a different school. I end up working with kids, right? And then I can tell myself, like, well, eventually you were going to end up working with middle school kids no matter what, right? Even if I was trying to avoid it. Now, this type of reasoning can, of course, be um, subjective because, well, I was writing about this in a text I was making, and I was saying, well, if it really came down to that, then I can tell myself things like, I don't want to be a millionaire, or I do want to be rich, or how come, like, why are there things that you want and don't achieve, and then maybe there are things that you want and achieve, but you don't recognize them because you think they're just given. You think that's just a given, right? Like, it was like, that's just so obvious that it fades into the background, right? um, so anyway, I think I'm getting jumbled up with the thoughts here, but because I'm seeing that it's more nuanced than just saying you are preconditioned, you are, your life's determined, destiny does exist, basically. um, like, shit's written with a pencil, you can say. It can be erased, but it's still gonna happen, one way or the other. um, and that's the thought, because what I've been thinking ultimately is, you can't really do whatever you want to do, right? Like, I was giving some examples, like, you can't go into outer space right now, right? You can't travel back in time. You can't fly to another country, right? You can't go to the bottom of the earth, to the bottom of the ocean, and explore what's down there, right? You can't become president. You can't have people, love you all of a sudden, from one day to the next. Like, like, you're limited in so many ways. But I'm not saying that you don't have freedom, that you don't have free will. I'm exaggerating when I say you don't, because you really do, right? You can make decisions, but I give the example of, it's like your shoe, it's like your foot in your shoe, right? And the wiggle room you have, in your shoe, that's about as much space, freedom you have in life, right? And the shoe is like the limit of your freedom, right? You're limited, and you are like the foot, right? So you are able to move around. I mean, like, if I want to eat tacos tonight instead of hamburgers or pizza, I can make those decisions, right? That is free will. But my point here is that you don't have that free will, which a lot of people talk about, which a lot of personal growth, self-help gurus talk about, right? Like, you have control of your life. Like, you need to recognize the power that you have in you. No, that's bullshit. You really don't. You're limited by your environment, by your genes, by your personality. You can develop, of course, you can change with time and grow and adapt further to the areas that you need to adapt to in order to become stronger in those areas, right? Such as the social realm, the professional realm, the relationship realm, romantic relationship realm, etc., right? But I mean, that takes time, and that's with help, and that's by making an effort, a continuous effort, right? Continuously working towards that objective, because ultimately you are kind of like caged in, boxed in, and I think more now than before, socially at least, I feel like that because of, like, social media. It's like, damn, I mean, and even before social media, with all of the world's problems, immigration. I mean, just look, like, I was looking up. I've been looking up for a while, like, not recently, but before, I was looking up, or I had been looking up, like, different countries, like, where I could go to live, and all of them ask for, like, well, some don't ask for a visa, but you can't stay there longer than like a year max, right? And again, it's all these immigration regulations. Like, I can't just get my stuff and be like, I want to move to a different country. I want to move and go live there legally, right? No, you have to go through all this bureaucratic process, get it, like, figure, like, pay a bunch of money. You have to get in the country, out the country, in the country, like, and you're wasting a bunch of money. So you basically have to be like a millionaire or have a lot of money in order to end up living somewhere else. It's crazy. So just the average Joe like me, like, I couldn't just get my things and move to a different country, right? And I think you could have done that before, or at least I think people weren't so people weren't sticklers for the rules back then, right? Like, if you wanted to, maybe it wasn't legal, but people didn't really enforce the law, the immigration law, wherever you wanted to go. And I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking about like anywhere in the world, right? Anywhere in the world, and I'm sure there probably are countries where you can just go stay and they won't say anything if you're just living there. Um, but I think it has become harder, and again, that's limiting freedom. So ironically, like, I'm at a place right now where I'm gonna be having a little bit more freedom, and I'm probably going to be making like more of these videos. Um, Lately, I've been writing. There's been a lot of things that I've been thinking about, that I've been chewing, that I've been like reading about too. Right now, I don't really have anything else in mind. Um, it's Halloween. It's almost Halloween, and I have been like reading this book in Spanish. It's called Pedro Páramo by Juan Rulfo, and in it, it's kind of like Coco, right? And I'm at this book club, and the people that I'm with at the book club really enjoy the book, so I didn't want to say like, oh, that's just like the movie Coco, because basically it's about a guy that he he starts to talk to spirits and ghosts of his past, right? And when he's doing this, um, like they're basically memories. Like, he's connecting with the memories of his ancestors, his family members who have died, right? And there's like a bunch of things that happen, and they're all kind of like revealing parts and fragments here and there, and you gotta kind of like piece everything together to figure out what happened. Um, I guess it's a good read if you like that type of book. I'm not really into that type of story. I prefer more of like philosophical or information books. Um, but anyway, this idea of free will and determinism came up in one of our book club chats, where basically we said like, or I thought like, the main character in the story, he's conditioned hardcore by his family, by his culture, by his environment, right? And you know, I guess genes are kind of invisible because we don't really see the genes, but they're in us. I mean, they're our constituents. They make us who we are, and our genes are there. But then, so is our environment acting on us, right? Limiting us, conditioning us, telling us, and you could say, well, I'm really not conditioned by my environment because my way of thinking is this intellectual way of thinking, right? And it's like, yeah, but you get that from the intellectuals, the books that you read on intellectuals, and it's like you get that from that world, right? You're just copying that world. And then I can say, well, not really, because I'm also this, I don't give a fuck, hip hop, whatever, like, back the fuck up off me, all this stuff. And it's like, well, you get that from the hip hop world, right? So then if I if I'm being honest with myself and I shed off all of those conditioned worlds, right, within me, my environment, my preferences, like I mentioned, that was one of them among all these other things, because your preferences, you kind of choose them, but you kind of don't. I mean, there's a reason why you like what you like, right? whether it's sports, whether it's art, whether it's philosophy, whether it's like whatever, whether it's nothing, right? You can also like nothing, and there's a reason for that too. It's not, so then when you strip away all of this, when you're like, okay, I'm gonna get rid of all my conditioning from my hip hop world, from my intellectual world, from my professional world, from my personal life world, from my, from my family, from my cultures, from my environment, then what are you left with, and then I was thinking, like, is there a way to achieve true freedom, right? Because then you can say, well, the way to achieve true freedom is by stripping away all that. That's one way, but then you're left with what? A spirit, a blank human, right? Like I don't know, not a rough draft, but like, yeah, basically a blank human, just your body, or not even that, because that's also conditioned. Your soul, your spirit, just like the one, I don't know. That's one way, but another way would be to, instead of, it's like when you enter a place that you don't like, or you don't want to be in it, you can either go backwards, you can go back and out, right? Run, or you can go through, right? Just push on, go through. So then with this idea, what I mean is, like, just let yourself be conditioned by it all. Like, just, okay, and fill yourself with everything, everything, everything. I'm super conditioned by everything, by all the people in my life, by as much information, which maybe at a subconscious, unconscious level is what I'm doing, by being exposed to all these books, ideas, things like that. Because I feel like people talk a lot about experiences. Like, you need to go out, tour the world, travel, live different experiences, and it's like people are kind of boring as hell. And the experiences that you can have out in the real world are kind of like, that's why rich people get bored. So I've always kind of felt that, not as an escape, but there is some truth to, if you want to live truly different things, not experiences, but not live, but, well, you do kind of live, but if you want to think about things in different ways, read a book, read books, and like, listen to podcasts from other people, like, watch videos, like, whatever, like, you can choose what, based on your preference, what you like. But that's the way that you basically learn and are able to really expand your world, right? I lost my train of thought here. But anyway, oh yeah, to achieve true freedom, I think you can push through. And then it would be like, and I wrote about this too in the text, what would that look like? Maybe it would look like a God, right? Like, eventually, after being exposed to everything, knowing everything, like, there's this idea of, you are able to know everything. I was reading the Jewish folklore, um, and in it there's a story about some guy who knows everything. I'm gonna see if I can find it on here, and he's like this grand master, and he becomes like a sage, right? um, and then he starts to basically, like, since he knows a lot about, well, it's a really long story, um, because he basically ends up becoming, like, he used to be a nobody, and he met this woman, fell in love, they both fell in love with each other, and then the woman takes him to meet the father, and he actually worked for the father. So the father says, I'm not going to have my slave or my employee become my son-in-law, right? So if you marry him, like, kiss the wealth goodbye, daughter. And the father disowns the daughter leaves with him. And 24 years go by where he's just studying, like, mad, studying. He eventually becomes like a prophet, not a prophet, but he becomes like this guide for people, right? Like, people come to him for problems. And the ending's kind of, I mean, not dumb, but it's not really that impactful, because at the end, the father doesn't know who this great guru is that everyone's looking to speak to. And then he meets him, and at first he doesn't know who he is, but then the daughter comes out, and he forget because the father was already saying things like, I regret not accepting, my daughter's husband or boyfriend or whatever. And then so he was already like sorry for everything. And then they reveal to him who they are. The daughter comes out and the guy comes out. Well, he was already there speaking to the father, and then he's like, this is me, like, and the father's like, oh wow. But the idea that you can be so learned and I guess wise or whatever, that you can basically solve people's problems, right? That you can help people out. I mean, that's a different type of knowledge, because I don't even pretend to be like that, because my realm is strictly like psychology, philosophy, sociology, methodology, right? Like these type of, and it's also limited, because if you ask me about chemistry, math, I know a little bit about, but if you were to ask me like about medicine, or chemistry, I wouldn't really know anything about those fields. So yeah, to become like very, like truly, I think the word is versatile or eclectic. To become truly eclectic, to become a multidisciplinary person, truly multidisciplinary. I don't know why that pronunciation is coming off wrong, but to become truly disciplinary, I think. To become like that, like I think about Leonardo da Vinci or someone like that, right? I think he was able to study many different areas, many different fields. You're just a curious person. You're all over the place. I'm a curious person, but within a certain realm, right? I have certain preferences. Um, but anyway, I guess the thought I want to finish off with here, because we're already almost 30 minutes into this, is not a pessimistic idea or feeling, because I don't want to tell you that you can't change or you can't grow or you can't develop or you can't have a better life than the one you're having right now, because you can, because you have probably been in worse places in your past or in bad places in your past, and then you were in better places, so, and as long as life keeps going, then you have the possibility, or you will probably live ups and downs, right? Um, I guess what I'm trying to say, and this is kind of the central idea of everything, is to accept that you're not always in control, right? And a lot of things are going to happen without your consideration, without your knowledge of it, without your permission, right? And accepting that, and not even accepting, not only accepting it, but tapping into it so you can go with the flow. I think that would be the optimal way to live, right? Because then you can see where things are more or less headed in your life. You see these changes, you see the people around you, your neighbors, your colleagues, your classmates, your friends, your family. You see all these people kind of like veering into this direction or that direction, and they're going to kind of take you along with them or not, or and you get a feel for this stuff, right? Like, okay, so then I guess I have to now stop doing this or start doing this, or so I guess that's kind of the idea of this video, break free. Anyway, that's all I got for this one. I'll probably be making more videos on other topics, because well, now I have a little bit more time, but I also got to rest. So anyway, that's all I got for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.